Hi, hello, welcome back. It's me, Merv, and welcome back to Merv Reads. I'm Merv, I read to you guys, and thank you so much for being my awesome listeners. We are getting back into the Bastard of Istanbul. We are still on the first chapter. Yes, it's lengthy, okay? It's a good story. Just listen, just enjoy. I had left you guys last. We had Banu just enjoying bread with everything, even bread with bread. Yes, that's our girl. So we're just gonna start where we left off. Banu frowned in between two bites of bread. But this problem occupied her for no more than a split second. Her theory of bread, which she was fond of pronouncing regularly and putting into practice all the time, was that if not given proper amount at each and every sitting, the stomach would not know it was full and would thereby ask for more food. For the stomach to fully comprehend its fullness, one had to eat a decent portion of bread with everything. Thus, Banu would have bread with potatoes, bread with rice, bread with pasta, bread with borok. And at those times when she wanted to give her stomach a far clearer message, she would have bread with bread. Dinner without bread was a sheer sin, which Allah might forgive, but Banu would not. Zeliha pursed her lips and stood silent, only now remembering the fate of the cinnamon sticks. Avoiding the question, she put a stuffed pepper on her plate. Each time she could easily tell if it was Banu or Sevriye or Feride who had prepared the peppers. If it was Banu, they turned out to be full of stuff they'd have otherwise sorely lacked, including peanuts and cashew and almonds. If it was Feride, they would be full of rice. Each green pepper so ballooned it was impossible to eat without breaking. When her tendency to overstuff the pepper was added to her love for seasonings of all sorts, Faride's dolme burst with herbs and spices. Depending on the combination, this turned out either exceptionally well or simply awful. When it was Sevriye who had cooked the dish, however, it was always sweeter, because she added powdered sugar to every edible thing, no matter what, as if it was to compensate for all the sourness in her universe. If it was Sevriye, I would never eat the food, because Please put no more sugar for me. Put it down. And today, it happened to be she who had made the dolmes. I was at the doctor's, Zeliha murmured, carefully stripping the dolme of its pale green cloak. Doctors, Feride grimaced, and lifted her fork in the air as if it were a baton she would use to indicate a faraway mountain range on a map, and her audience was not her own family, but students in a geography class. Feride had a problem when making eye contact. She was more comfortable talking to objects. Accordingly, she addressed her words to Zeliha's plate. Haven't you seen the newspaper this morning? They operate on a 9-year-old child for appendicitis and forgot a pair of scissors inside. Do you have any idea how many doctors in this country should be put into jail for medical malpractice? Among all the Kazanci women, Feride was the one best acquainted with medical procedures. In the last 6 years, she had been diagnosed with 8 different illnesses, each of which sounded more alien than the one before. Whether it was doctors who could not make up their mind, or Feride herself industriously working on new infirmities, one could never tell. After a while, it didn't really matter one way or another. Sanity was a promised land. The Shangri-La she had been deported from as a teenager, and to which she intended to return to one day. The way there, she rested at sundry stopovers that came with erratic names and dreary treatments. Even as a little girl, there was something bizarre about Feride. A most difficult student at school, she had shown no interest in anything other than physical geography classes, and in the geography classes had shown no interest in anything other than a few subjects, starting with the layers of the atmosphere. Her favorite topic were how the ozone was broken down in the stratosphere and the connection between surface ocean currents and atmospheric patterns. She had learned all the information she could gather on high latitudes, stratospheric circulation, the characteristics of the mesosphere, valley winds, and sea breezes, solar cycles and tropical latitude, and the shape and the size of the earth. Everything she had memorized at school she would then volley in the house, peppering every conversation with atmospheric information. Each time she displayed her knowledge on physical geography, she would speak with unprecedented zeal. Floating high above the clouds, jumping from one atmospheric layer to the next. Then a year after her graduation, Feride had started to display signs of eccentricity and detachment. Although Faride's interest in physical geography had never petered out in the fullness of time, it inspired yet another area of interest that she profoundly enjoyed: accidents and disasters. Every day she read the third page of tabloids. Car accidents, serial killings, hurricanes, earthquakes, fire and flood, terminal illnesses, contagious diseases, and unknown viruses. Feride would pursue them all. Her selective memory would absorb local, national, and international calamities, only to convey them to others out of the blue. It never took her long to darken any conversation, as from birth she was inclined to see misery in each and every story, and to fabricate some when there was none. But the news she conveyed did not upset the others, as they had renounced believing in her long ago. Her family had figured out one way of dealing with insanity, and that was to confuse it with lack of credibility. Feride was first diagnosed with a stress ulcer, a diagnosis no one in the family took seriously because stress had become some sort of catchphrase as soon as it was introduced into Turkish culture. Stress had been so euphorically welcomed by the Stempolites that there had emerged countless patients of stress in the city. Feride had traveled non-stop from one stress-related illness to another, surprised to discover the vastness of the land, since there seemed to be virtually nothing that could not be related to stress. After that, she had loitered around obsessive-compulsive disorder, dissociative amnesia, and psychotic depression, managing to poison herself. She was once diagnosed with bittersweet nightshade, the name she almost relished among her infirmities. At each stage of her journey to insanity, Feride changed her hair color and style so that after a while, the doctors, in their endeavor to follow the changes in her psychology, started to keep a hair chart. Short, mid-length, very long, and once entirely shaven, spiked, flattened, flipped, and braided, subjected to tons of hairspray, gel, wax, or styling cream, accessorized with berets, gems, or ribbons, cropped in punk style, pinned up in ballerina buns, highlighted and dyed in every possible hue. Each one of her hairstyle had been a fleeting episode, while her illness had remained firm and fixed. After a lengthy sojourn in major depressive disorder, Feride had moved to borderline, a term construed. Here is my diagnosis. I just think she's Munchausen and she's borderline. Yes, she's borderline and she's Munchausen. That's what I think. I would say, yeah, let's give it Munchausen. A term construed quite arbitrarily by different members of the Kazanci family. Her mother interpreted the word border as a problem to be associated with police, custom officers, and illegality, thereby finding a felon foreigner in the persona of Feride. She thus became even more suspicious of this crazy daughter whom she had not trusted in the first place. In stark contrast for Faride's sisters, the concept of border mainly invoked the idea of edge, and the idea of edge invoked the image of the deadly cliff. For quite a while, they treated her with utmost care, as if she were a walking somnambulist on the wall meters high and could fall down any time. However, the word border invoked the trim of lettuce work for Petite Ma, and she studied her granddaughter with deep interest and sympathy. Feride had recently immigrated into another diagnosis nobody could even pronounce, let alone dare to interpret: hemiphrenic schizophrenia. Ever since then, she remained faithful to her new nomenclature, as if finally content to achieve the nominal clarification she sorely needed. Whatever the diagnosis, she lived according to the rules of her own fantasy land, outside of which she had never set foot. But on this first Friday of July, Zeliha paid no attention to her sister's renowned distaste for doctors. As she started to eat, she realized how hungry she had been all day long. Almost mechanically, she ate a piece of chorok, poured herself a glass of ayran, forked another green dolma onto her plate, and revealed the piece of information growing inside her. I went to the gynecologist today. Gynecologist? Feride reported instantly, but she made no specific comments. Gynecologists were the one group among all the physicians she had the least experience with. I went to a gynecologist today to have an abortion. Zeliha completed her sentence without looking at anyone. Banu dropped her chicken wing and looked down at her feet as if they had something to do with this. Sabri pursed her lips hard. Feride shrieked and then oddly unleashed a whoop of laughter. Your mother tensely rubbed her forehead, feeling the first aura of terrible headache approaching. And Petite Ma just continued to eat her soup. It might be because she had gone quite deaf in the course of recent months. It might also be because she was suffering from early stages of dementia. Perhaps it was simply because she thought there was nothing to fuss about. With Petite Ma, you never knew. How could you slaughter your baby? Sevier asked in awe. It is not a baby, Zeliha shrugged. At this stage, I'd rather call it a droplet. That'd be more scientific. Scientific? You are not scientific. You are cold-blooded. Sevier burst into tears. Cold-blooded? That's what you are. Well, I have good news then. I have not killed it, her. Whatever. Zeliha turned toward her sister calmly. Not that I did not want to. I did. I tried to have the droplet aborted, but somehow it did not happen. What do you mean? Asked Banu. Zeliha put a brave face. Allah has sent me a message, she said tonelessly, knowing it was the wrong thing to say to a family like hers, but saying it anyway. So there I am, lying, anesthetized, with a doctor and a nurse on each side. In a few minutes the operation will begin, and the baby will be gone, forever. But then, just when I am about to go unconscious on the operating table, I hear afternoon prayer from a nearby mosque. The prayer is so soft, like a piece of velvet. It envelops my whole body. Then, as soon as the prayer is over, I hear a murmur, as if somebody is whispering in my ear, Thou shalt not kill this child. Sevier flinched. Feride nervously coughed into her table napkin. Banu swallowed hard. and Gulsum frowned. Only Fatima remained far off in a better land, having now finished her soup, obediently waiting for her next dish to arrive. And then Zeliha carried on with her story. This mysterious voice commands, "Ooh, Zeliha! Ooh, you the culprit of the righteous Kazanci family! Let this child live! You don't know it yet, but this child will be a leader! This baby will be a monarch!" "He cannot!" the teacher Sabria broke in, missing no opportunity to show her expertise. "There aren't monarchs anymore. We are a modern nation." "Ooh, you sinner! This child will rule over others," Zeliha continued, pretending not to have heard the lesson. "Not only this country, not only the entire Middle East and the Balkans, but the whole world will know her name. This child of yours will lead the masses and bring peace and justice to humankind." Zeliha paused and let out a breath. "Anyhow, good news, everybody. The baby's still with me. Before long, we'll put another plate at this table." "A bastard!" Gulsum exclaimed. "You want to bring into this family a child out of wedlock? A bastard?" The words' effects spread out like pebbles thrown into still water. "Shame on you! You always brought disgrace on this family." Gulsum's face contorted in anger. "Look at your nose piercing, all that makeup, and the rewardingly short skirts, and oh, those high heels. This is what happens when you dress up like a whore. You should thank Allah night and day. You should be grateful that there are no men around in this family. They'd have killed you." It wasn't quite true. Not the part about killing, perhaps, but the part about there being no men in the family. There were, somewhere, but it was also true that there were far fewer men than women in the Kazanci family. Like an evil spell put on the whole lineage, generation after generation of Kazanci men had died young and unexpectedly. Fatma's husband, Reza Salim Kazanci, for instance, had all of a sudden dropped dead at 60, unable to breathe. Then, in the next generation, Levent Kazanci had died of a heart attack before he had reached his 51st birthday. Following the pattern of his father and his father's father, it looked as if the lifespan of the men in the family got shorter and shorter with each generation. There was great-uncle who had run away with a Russian prostitute, only to be robbed by her of all his money and frozen to death in St. Petersburg. Another kinsman had gone to his last resting place after being hit by a car while trying to cross the Autobahn heavily intoxicated. Various nephews had died as early as their 20s, one of them drowning while swimming drunk under the full moon. Another one hit in the chest by a bullet fired by a hooligan enjoying himself after his soccer team had won the cup. Yet another nephew had fallen into 6-foot deep ditch, dug out by the municipality to renovate the street gutters. Then there was a second cousin, Zia, who had shot himself for no apparent reason. Generation after generation, as if complying with an unwritten rule, the men in the Kazanci family tree had died young. The greatest age any had reached in the current generation was 41. Determined not to repeat the pattern, another great uncle had taken utmost care to lead a healthy life, strictly refraining from overeating, sex with prostitutes, contacts with hooligan, alcohol, and other sort of intoxicants, and ended up crushed by a concrete chunk falling from a construction site he happened to pass by. Then there was Jalal, a distant cousin, who was the love of Zeliha's life, and the husband she lost in a brawl. For reasons still unclear, Jalal had been sentenced to 2 years on charge of bribery. During this time, Jalal's presence in the family had been confined to the infrequent letters he had been sending from jail, so vague and distant that when the news of his death arrived for everyone other than his wife, it had felt like losing a third arm, one that you never had. He departed this life in a fight, not by a blow or a punch, but by stepping on a high-voltage electricity cable while trying to find a better spot to watch 2 other prisoners exchange blows. After losing the love of her life, Zeliha sold their house and joined Kazanci domicile as humorless historian teacher, with a Spartan sense of discipline and self-control. Just as she waged battle against plagiarism at school, she took it upon herself to crusade against impulsiveness, disruption, and spontaneity at home. Then there was Sabahattin, the tender-hearted, good-natured, but equally self-effacing husband of Banu. Though he was not blood relative and looked exceptionally hale and hearty, though the two were still married on paper except for a brief period following their honeymoon, Banu had spent more time in her family's Konak than at home with her husband. So noticeably was their physical distance that when Banu had announced being heavy with twin boys, everyone had joked about technical impossibility of pregnancy. Yet the honest fate awaiting every Kazanci man had struck the twin at early age. Upon losing her toddlers to childhood illness, Banu permanently moved into her family house, only to sporadically visit her husband in the years that followed. Every now and then she went to see if he was doing okay, more like a concerned stranger than a loving spouse. Then, of course, there was Mustafa, the only son in the current generation, a precious gem bequeathed by Allah, amid 4 daughters. The result of Levant Kazanci's fixation on having a boy to bear his surname had been that 4 Kazanci sisters had grown up feeling unwelcomed visitors. The first 3 children were all girls. Banu, Zeliha, and Feride had each felt like an introduction before the real thing, the accidental prelude in their parents' sex life. So determinedly were they oriented toward a male child. As for the 5th child, Zeliha, she knew she had been conceived with their hope that fortune could be generous twice in a row. After finally having a boy, her parents had wanted to see if they were lucky enough to make another one. Mustafa was precious from the day he was born. A series of measures had been taken to protect him from grim fate awaiting all the men in the family tree. As a baby, he was bundled in evil eye beads and amulets. As a toddler, he was kept under constant surveillance, and until age 8, his hair was kept long like a girl's, so as to deceive Israel, the angel of death. Whenever someone needed to address the child, "Girl," they would say, "Girl, come here." Though a good student, Mustafa's high school was ruined by his inability to socialize. A king in his house The boy seemed to refuse to be among many in the classroom, so unpopular had he become over time. When Gulsum wanted to throw a party for Mustafa and his friends to celebrate their graduation, there was no one to invite, so arrogantly antisocial outside his house. So indisputably cherished as the king at the home, and with the passing of each birthday so ominously close to the doom suffered by all Kazanci men. After a while, it seemed like a good idea to send Mustafa abroad. Within a month, Petitma's jewels were all sold. For the money required, an 18-year-old son of Kazanci family left Istanbul for Arizona, where he became the undergraduate student in agriculture and biosystem engineering and would hopefully survive to his old age. Hence, when on the first Friday of July, Kulsum chided Zeliha, asking her to be grateful for lack of men in the family, there was some truth somewhere in that statement. In the response, Zeliha said nothing. Instead, she went to the kitchen to find and feed the only meal in the house, a silver tabby with insatiable hunger and unusual fondness for water and plentiful social stress symptoms, which could at best be interpreted as independent and at worst as neurotic. His name was Pasha III. In Kazanci Konak, generations of cat had succeeded each other like human beings. All had been loved without exception, swept away solely by old age, unlike human beings. Though each cat had retained its distinct character overall, two competing genes ran feline lineage in the house. On the one hand, there was the noble gene coming from the long-haired, flat-nosed, powdered white Persian cat Petitma had brought with her as a young bride in late 1920s. The cat must have been what little dowry she had. The women in the neighborhood had mocked. On the other hand, there was the street gene coming from an unidentified but apparently tawny street cat the white Persian had managed to copulate with in one of her runaways, generation after generation, as if taking turns. One of the two genetic traits had prevailed in feline inhabitants born under this roof. After a while, Kazanci's had stopped bothering to find alternative names, instead just following the feline genealogy. If the kitten looked like the descendant of an aristocratic line, white and furry and flat-nosed, they would name it successively Pasha I, Pasha II, Pasha III. If it were from the street cat's lineage, they would name it Sultan, a more superior name signaling the belief that the street cats were self-governing, free-spirit, and no need of flattering anyone. To this day, the nominal distinction, without exception, had been reflected in the personalities of the cats under this roof. Those of nobility turned out to be aloof and needy, quiet types, constantly leaking themselves, wiping out all human contact whenever someone patted them. Those of second group had been more curious and vigorous types who delighted in bizarre luxuries such as eating chocolates. Pasha III characteristically embodied the features of his lineage, always walking with pompous rhythm, as if tiptoeing through broken glass. He had two favorite occupations, which he put into practice on every occasion: gnawing electric cords and observing birds and butterflies, too lazy to chase them. Of the latter he could get tired, but of the former never. Almost every electric cord in the house had been once or thrice chewed, scraped, dented, and damaged by him. Pasha III had managed to survive to a ripe old age, despite the numerous electric shocks he had received. "There, Pasha, good boy." Zeliha fed him chunks of feta cheese, his favorite. She then put on an apron and toiled through a hill of pots and pans and plates. When she had finished the dishes and calmed herself, she shuffled back to the dinner table. There she found the word bastard still hanging in the air, and her mother still frowning. They all sat there, motionless, until someone remembered the dessert. A sweet, soothing smell filled the room as Sevrier poured rice pudding from a huge cauldron into tiny bowls. While Sevrier kept dolling with practiced ease, Feride followed her, sprinkling shredded coconut on top of each bowl. It would have been much better with cinnamon, whined Banu. You shouldn't have forgotten to buy cinnamon. Leaning back in her chair, Zeliha lifted her nose and inhaled as if taking a drag of invisible cigarette, as if she breathed out fatigue bit by bit. She felt the yo-yo indifference slacken off again. Her spirits sank under the weight of all that had and had not happened on this prolonged and hellish day. She scanned the dinner table, feeling more and more guilt-ridden at the sight of each bowl of rice pudding now canopied by coconut flakes. Then, without turning her gaze, she murmured in a voice so gracefully soft, it didn't sound like her at all. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry, Baba. And that's where our chapter 1 ends. Chapter 2 is called Garbanzo Beans. We're gonna get into in our next video. Next episode. I hope you guys liked this. How do you guys like it? What are the thoughts so far? What do we think about Zeliha? What would you have done in this situation? I feel so sorry for her. I feel so bad for her. This is so messy. So messy. Oh, breaks my heart. What do you guys think? Who's your favorite character so far? So many feelings, so many emotions going on. We're gonna discover chapter 2 together? Right? You're coming back? You're coming back, right? Alright. Well, bye. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day. It was nice seeing you. Nice reading to you.